Greetings, everybody. My name is Silver Thunder, the extraordinarily ordinary gaming squirrel, and we are back with another episode of Monster Hunter World. Man, what a journey this has been so far. Like I had mentioned in my last video, I've been kind of grinding my way towards Fatalis, and I had to showcase this takedown because this fella took me about 6 or 7 attempts. It is the... finally, I have defeated the raging Brachydios. Boy, this was a doozy of a fight, and this is my first time taking him down. Don't necessarily expect, I would say, expert-level gameplay here, as I always like to caution. But I am incredibly proud of taking him down, I think without truly fainting. Actually, no, I think I did have technically 2 carts, but my Palico saved my butt for one of those. So, you know, as far as the reward screen is concerned, I believe I had just fainted once during the quest. We'll just go with that. But a victory is a victory, so enjoy. And before we get into today's discussion, I have an interesting topic today, as I always try to cater them to interesting subjects. I want to give you my album recommendation of the day. Today's album is going to be Vanishing Kids, that's the name of the band, and their album Heavy Dreamer. This is an interesting little band that I've gotten into recently. It's a hazy, dreamy, and heavy psychedelic doom metal / doom rock journey, interwoven with engrossing ambient atmospheres, some slower, hypnotic passages with contrasting, crushing guitars. It's a motley mix that can appeal to a wide variety of listeners while remaining true to its niches and inspirations. Definitely a compelling mix, in my opinion. So I highly recommend that you take a gander at that album. It is available on Bandcamp. Always like to ferry people Bandcamp's way. It's one of my favorite music platforms. Well, with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into the topic du jour. And it's a bit of a more... It's more of a current events sort of topic as opposed to the philosophical nonsense that I normally like to ramble and ponder about, but this one has some really huge ramifications in the gaming community. And I am one of millions of voices talking about this, so you know, this probably is not news to you if you're within the gaming periphery, but Sony has recently announced, as of yesterday, at the time of recording this, if I recall correctly, that they are going to be stopping production of physical games and also physical disk drives for their consoles by 2028. They're also ending the support for the storefronts for the PS3 and PS Vita online stores, respectively. And oh boy, this, you know, as if this is news, the internet is up in arms. The only question that I have is, what now? But yeah, no, it's very understandable. It's very concerning from, I think primarily from a game's preservation perspective. There is a tangibility that's attached to having something in a physical media form that whenever that's completely robbed of you, you know, well, one, there is a significant debate as to whether or not you actually, quote-unquote, own the media that you are purchasing digitally. You know, is a licensure that can be revoked at any moment actually true ownership? You know, the corporate side says yes, with an asterisk. I think most of the rest of us say no. It's similar to CDs versus MP3s and streaming for music. A very big conversation surrounds that, and I am of the persuasion that I always prefer to own it on physical media like a CD, maybe vinyl if I really like the album. So yeah, as far as where I'd fall in this debacle that's going on, I definitely think that the loss of physical media, I don't want to necessarily say devastating, that might be a bit too hyperbolic, but it's going to have some pretty bad ramifications going forward. It's a trend that I think a lot of us were anticipating, simply because that's how the world has been progressing technologically, really, is moving away from more physical media and physical forms of, well, entertainment, physical forms of work, and moving over to more into the digital sphere. As the internet became more sophisticated, and also now AI and other things are becoming more sophisticated, there's less and less need for physical forms of media and retention and storage and things like that. But once again, I have to consider, at what cost? At what cost? Eventually, however far down the line, my kids are going to be inheriting my CD collection. And whether or not they will actually want that CD collection, that'll be up to them. But, what if I didn't have anything like that to hand down to them? Or, think about how it would apply to, say, vehicles. Humans like to use those. What if the only way that you quote-unquote own a vehicle is the license that you rent for it? And once that license expires, then the computer and electronics in the car don't work anymore. They're registered to just you, and when you pass away, it's non-transferable to your family. That sounds a little conspiracy theorist, but honestly, the way that things have been trending, not just in the video game sphere, but as I point out in music and other places, car industry, it is a great incentive for companies to really take away that volition that comes with physical ownership of things, to prohibit and control resale. These licenses keep you from reselling your license or game or whatever have you to somebody else. I think the closest thing that we get in that conversation to true passing of the ownership is that I believe in Steam, if you have a loved one designated as like your legacy contact, I think that's what it's called, then your loved one can take ownership of your Steam library. So that's a good step in the right direction. And honestly, if the digital stuff is inevitable and physical media and things like that are truly on their way out, then I think that if there's no compromise to be garnered on that sphere, then we really need to push these companies to ensure that there is a transferable agency, I guess. It might be the best word for it. A way to still retain that and retain ownership, even if something, adverse were to happen to you, it would be able to go to your family. Just, you want to be able to get and keep what you pay for, Yeah, it's kind of a depressing conversation whenever you really think about it. And it's difficult to consider, too, where are we going to go from here? Like, how is this argument going to evolve? Because the big overarching argument right now is, for everybody to push back, and for everybody to, urge these companies to not do this. And there is a degree in which, backlash on the internet does work. But here's the key thing. And if you are going to really, really decry this decision, I think this is how we're going to have to do this. Vote, as always, with your wallet. Money is the most important thing to any company. Any company that tells you otherwise is lying to you. I hate to be the pessimist, but that is the reason why companies form, is to make money. And the thing that is going to persuade their decisions more than anything else is their bottom line, their profit margins. Often we see so many games and artistic creations and things like that affected by not necessarily even the company executives, but the shareholders, the people who control the finances in the company. And if you really are protesting PlayStation's decision, or Sony's decision, I should say, to cut off digital media in the future, then you need to vote with your wallet, and as painful as it might be, depending on if you have any exclusive games that you're really looking forward to, do not buy from Sony anymore until they reverse this decision. Do not buy the PS6 whenever that's going to come up for pre-order. Don't buy the PS5 console. Don't buy Don't buy, microtransactions on the Sony storefront, you know? Try your very best to buy any physical PS5 games that you can find. Buy them secondhand, even, and used. That way, Sony is not necessarily getting an extra cut of the profit. And that's something that you would have to commit to. And it's hard because entertainment, especially, on your favorite game console or favorite games, it can be a difficult thing to either postpone or let go. Now, I'm not the kind of squirrel that really has to have the newest thing. I'm kind of a cheapskate, really. I really wait until the deep discounts for most games. I think the Monster Hunter series is about the only exception. They're the only games that I have pre-ordered for the past decade, essentially. But, similarly, if I really, really hated what Capcom was doing, if I really, really wanted to voice my opinion in a way that Capcom would hear it, it would be to vote with my wallet. It would be to not buy anything that Capcom makes until they walk it back, or until they take better proactive steps to solve this problem. Same thing with Sony here. That's the main point that I'm trying to get at. Now, the other argument that people are also trying to employ for this is, if buying is not ownership, then piracy is not theft. I can understand where that kind of viewpoint comes from. I can understand the sentiment behind it. And I know that any word that I or anybody else could say is not going to stop people from pirating. It's been going on since, people could download stuff. I don't know. I feel like that for me, reciprocating a wrong with another wrong at the end of the day is not going to really get anybody anywhere. You don't have a right, you just have two wrongs stacked on top of each other. I really think that the best way to do it, once again, is to just deny ourselves of what we're wanting in that moment. I've talked a lot about instant gratification and how hard it is for us to resist it, especially in this modern culture where we can download anything really at the tap of fingers. But if there's a new game that you really, really want that's only available digitally now via Sony, but you're still angry with what Sony is doing, then that's a gun that you have to stick to, You really have to commit to it, and multiple hundreds, millions of people, potentially even, will have to commit to the same goal in order for Sony's bottom line to be really effective enough for them to act, or for them to at least perceive the physical threat. So, yeah, it's a sticky situation. I don't condone piracy at all, and I would not recommend that be the course of action. Like it or not, principle or not, it is still illegal. And, you can call me a lawful good, but I am a squirrel, apart from the gaming rig and stuff like that. I want to try my very best to follow the law of the land. So I know that I will not be engaging in that activity, and I know I can't stop you, but I would just consider to not try to make a right out of an initial wrong. That never really goes well for anybody involved. So, once again, we're left with a pretty controversial situation, and I really want to know your thoughts about this. Please throw them down in the comments below. If you disagree with me, please let me know. If you have any other suggestions or thoughts that people can do to really, combat the situation, for lack of a better word, then let me know. And start a discussion, I'm really curious to see what you guys think about this. But honestly, at the end of the day, if there are enough people who do band together around this and who do commit to protesting Sony with their wallets, then we could very, very well change the tides. But it's not going to happen unless we commit to that goal. And I know going forward that I will likely not be purchasing the next Sony console myself, at least until something like this is rectified, because, you know, my PS5 currently has a disk drive. The only piece of technology, gaming technology that I really have that doesn't have like a form of physical media drive is my gaming PC, which, you know, the PC community has been kind of facing this sort of thing for a very long time. It's fortunate that we have a very largely pro-consumer company like Steam out there. That's the larger, that makes up the largest of the storefronts, I would say. But, yeah. It just, what Sony is doing, I think, is very anti-consumer, and I think ultimately short-sighted. Very much focused on those profit margins more than anything else. But anyhow, I will go ahead and wrap up my thoughts with that for now. We still got a good bit of time left on this hunt because this savage savage. I keep on wanting to call him Savage. It's Savage Devil Joe, and there's my feint. Yeah. Good thing I had feline insurance. That was very helpful. But it's Raging Brachydios. Yeah, this guy was a bit of a doozy. And as I said, this is about my 6th or 7th attempt to make, to really go after this guy and to really take him down. And I really want to shout out Giddy Fox Gaming, because he had a guide that really helped me out with this fight, though I'm sorry, I did not use Mushroom Mancer. I opted to go for the quote-unquote pre-Safi meta bow set up to max out my elemental damage. I do have health boost up all the way, and that was significantly helpful. You can call me a scrub if you like, but, you know, as someone who's not necessarily the best at dodging, it helps to have a little bit more punching bag room, as it were. But once again, I was proud of this hunt. I really, I feel like that the second phase in this hunt is the phase that we're in right now is really the worst one, just because the area is so oppressive, and he really has access to his full normal kit of moves, and it just, you're just having to balance so much in this stage of the fight. So, I don't know, this was definitely the wall for me here. But a big part of what helped my bow play, funnily enough, if you want a factoid / tidbit about any any aspiring bow mains out there, I used to really heavily rely on Evade Extender level 2 for Monster Hunter World. And it was great. I was zipping around like a maniac, but also not really realizing how far out of position it was making me for my shots, and how much stamina that I was having to expend getting back into position, especially with a monster like this that moves around and moves away so frequently. And I was afraid that without that evade extender, I was going to be terrible at dodging. Oh, we're actually moving into phase 3 right here now. So I took the Giddy Fox advice and prepared myself to get back to camp. I was just making sure that my eyes were not deceiving me, which they were not. He was going to that last area over there. So I decided to go ahead and make my retreat at that time. Or did I make my retreat? No, I guess I had all the other supplies that I need. Never mind. Past Silver Thunder is confusing present Silver Thunder. But yeah, taking off that evade extender level 2. 1 helped me to evade less mindlessly. Or I should say, it helped me to be more mindful of where I was evading. And also, more crucially, it left room for more skills, something that has a bit more utility in a fight like this. Like, I believe I have Part Breaker equipped, or, getting an extra level for my elemental attack, or, something along those lines. In Monster Hunter World, the monsters are fast, but don't necessarily move so dang fast that you need that extra evade range, at least for the bow. The bow's already pretty agile enough, and the dodges are really built into the gameplay, because you have to dodge to increase your charge levels to make your arrows stronger. Now, other Monster Hunter games like Monster Hunter Rise, I would argue that a big extender is a lot more essential, simply because the monsters move so extremely fast in that game that, I don't know, maybe I should try the same approach, but honestly, from what I read in the forums and guides and things like that, they definitely recommend running at least one level of Evade Extender, if not two, in Monster Hunter Rise. But, you know, each person can approach these games in their own individual playstyles. Sure, there's the meta. I technically have the quote-unquote meta pre-Sophie bow set on, but at the same time, there's room for individuality, experimentation, and, you know, that's part of what makes Monster Hunter so compelling is that you can make a build catered to what you want from your given weapon. And kaboom, he blows himself up. Dummy. Yeah, that's why I say, like, although this phase is very intimidating, and yes, you really have to watch your footing and things like that, there are, and you can correct me or disagree with me if you like, I feel like that there are less instant punishes in this phase than there are in other parts of the fight. That slime does not explode instantaneously anymore. And that alleviates a whole level, I don't know, it's easier for me mentally. And that might also be because of my choice of weapon too. Maybe for a different weapon, this is like a truly hellish fight. Not saying it's not challenging with the bow by any means. He definitely kicked my tail several times. But, I don't know, the mechanic of him doing this, roaring and damaging himself, really kind of gives you the space that you need in order to breathe. At least as far as I was concerned. And once again, that might be because as a ranged weapon, I can get away from him and attack him from a distance, whereas, you know, in a melee weapon, you're having to, like, panic and try to find the nearest, you know, bit of ground that's not covered in this explosive goop. But, you know, as much as I do get frustrated easily sometimes, whenever I really just calm down, take a deep breath, realize that my victories are not owned to me, unfortunately I get to a really bad instant gratification, once again, mindset, if I am pressed enough for it. But once I get out of that mindset and just kind of, you know, let the hunt unfold, you know, as a bow user, I feel like that I'm much more reacting to what a monster does as opposed to trying to push extremely hard for my own quarter and things like that. I don't know. I feel like that I was able to emerge victorious from this because of it, and victory is going to be soon. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are, and if you are a bow main, what your take on the bow strategy is, and whether I am a noob, scrub, terrible bow player, everything in between. But either way, I really enjoy this weapon. It's been my main for a very long time. My very first main was Greatsword until I realized I kind of sucked with it. Still love that weapon, though. Honestly, I really have enjoyed all of the Monster Hunter weapons that I've tried. And perhaps I'll branch out into more, but right now my major focus is beating Fatalis in Monster Hunter World before I move on to another endeavor. And boom! There we have it. You did not hear it because it was off camera. And there's my screenshot. You know, although I'm recording, I had to document the photo evidence of this as well. But there was quite a squirrely shriek that happened at the end of this hunt. Let me tell you what, because, whew, it was a doozy. But I want to thank you so much for tuning in and hearing my thoughts about, you know, the current goings-on in the gaming world, and also a little ramble about today's hunt. Like I said, feel free to throw up your thoughts in the comments below. Would love to hear what you have to say. And if you like this kind of content, if you like what you hear, that's awesome. Then if you would please hit that like button and hit the subscribe button to get more. Like I said, I'm trying to remain on a rotation of Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes. This week was a little different with the holiday and things like that. I try to be as consistent as I can, but I am a family squirrel first and foremost, so those priorities come first. Anyhow, thank you again for tuning in. This is Silver Thunder signing out, and I will see you on the next one.